I don't rank Shadow Warriors particularly high on the group of 360 shooting infantry units. Generally, I think like Deepwood Scouts and Chameleon Skinks are kind of the top of that particular bracket, but definitely still something to offer here. This is another replay from ConsulofRome here in the Warhammer World Championship up against the Skaven. He's got Olithnar, 4 Shadow Warriors already opening up on these weapons teams, trading some fire. We've got Avalanche Mortars here and some Giselles, 2 units of Giselles, a bunch of Spearmen and Illyrian Reavers, Silver Helms, and yeah, some Reaver Archers and so on. Basically, a whole bunch of High Elves, a few Rangers too. We've got Doggos hiding here in the woods, some Wolf Rats, Clan Rats, a couple of Rat Ogres in the back as well, the Grinders to help protect, a Plague Priest to summon and drain, Deathmaster Snitch leading the way. But right off the bat, Shadow Walkers both doing and taking damage pretty significantly here as the Reavers charge into the Wolf Rats there on the side. They do offer quite a bit. 360 shooting is pretty nice. Vanguard, obviously, they have really decent stats in comparison to, say, like Chameleon Skinks or even Deepwood Scouts. Their attack and defense are quite decent, so if they can use all their ammo and then in the late game move into a melee engagement, that's ideally the best use case for them, but you do pay quite a bit for that melee power. As a result, their shooting isn't quite as cost effective as something like, say, Deepwood Scouts. Again, Deepwood Scouts are kind of the best, one of the best in that front, but yeah, these Reavers here get caught up by Warp Grinders, trying their best to shut down these Giselles. The Avalanche Mortars, though, already getting multi-shot by all of those Shadow Warriors, like here. For example, we've got these summons getting on these Spearmen, or actually not summons, those are just regular Skaven slaves. But let's say you did see some summons here, for example. Speaking of which, Lore of Beasts on High Elves, unfortunately, just gives you an Eagle, which does not cause terror. I don't know if the High Elf player immediately realized that, but yeah, unfortunately, like a terror route on this little blob here would have been fantastically timed. Rat Ogres and everything else would have quickly terror routed. They are going to route anyway. Shadow Warriors and Olithnar himself pouring in some arrows into that engagement, but this matchup, for a few reasons, Shadow Warriors can do quite well here. Number one is the Skaven infantry is relatively quick. Shadow Warriors are quicker than, say, Lothard Seaguard or something, you know, regular archers. They can also shoot while they're moving away. So against, you know, the Skaven infantry, which tends to be relatively quick, can bog down regular archers pretty easily. Having the extra stats, the mobility to either avoid the summons or just fight them, definitely gives you some benefit here. And of course, Vanguards also can be very good against Skaven if you catch them in a good Vanguard situation. I've seen a number of replays where Shadow Walkers, for example, just light up like a Warp Lightning Cannon immediately. Or like here, we saw them immediately lighting up the Avalanche Mortars, right? So definitely very solid value if they can use their ammunition and then, again, fight in melee after. So far, things are looking pretty even, honestly. The Wolf Rats have taken some damage, but they're now chasing these Reaver Archers away. High Elves kind of collapsing with some more forces down on the low ground. The Plague Priest still very healthy, and it's definitely going to be a problem to deal with. Right now, the Archers are going after the Warp Grinders. This is a pretty good target. Only 70 armor on these guys. It's okay. It's not amazing, but they do have pretty low HP pool overall as a unit. So, you know, multi-firing them, very solid. Of course, also these low armor, higher value, mid to high value, I should say, Clan Molder units, the Wolf Rats, and these Regiment of Renown Rat Ogres here, taking plenty of arrows very cost effectively as well. It's another great target to shoot at. Some point blank Shadow Warriors over there, getting caught up in some Clan Rat summons. You don't necessarily want the Shadow Warriors fighting Clan Rat summons for too long because it's not very efficient, and they are relatively low HP. They are going to take some hits from the Clan Rats, and it won't be great for you, but like in this situation, they can potentially get away here, or at the very least kind of tie these Clan Rats down, not allow them to get loose. Certainly they'll take less damage than something like Lothar and Seaguard have pretty good melee defense, but I mean, they're not going to be able to get away in the same way. Archers definitely, I mean, they have okay melee defense for a skirmish unit, but it's not anything to write home about. This Mage of Beasts, unfortunately, is definitely going to have to write home about this, getting pushed off by the Plague Priest there. Her Summoned Eagle is chasing off the Pit Fighters of Hell's Deep, though. Also got some Reavers chasing off weapon teams out in the distance there. Excellent job with that light cavalry. Definitely against the Skaven, very... they're going to have a lot of routing units, and especially the key ones like those weapons teams do need to make sure they stay routed. But speaking of routed, these Rout Ogres here getting a nice charge. Plague Furnace is able to support, and they do clean up one unit of Shadow Warriors here, the Rangers as well. Still two units of Shadow Warriors here. One completely full health. They do still have martial prowess both as well, which is pretty important. That extra stats, you know, again, something that you do pay for with these Shadow Warriors, but makes them pretty substantial against something like Skaven, where generally their units don't have good stats. Even like Rat Ogres, for example, right? Only 26 defense, 34 attack, like pretty comparable, honestly, at the end of the day. So in a sustained fight, I mean, obviously Rat Ogre is a very good charge bonus at 50, but in a sustained fight, in theory, the Shadow Warriors can trade okay. And now Lithanar scurrying away here. Lithanar hasn't really been challenged, thankfully, by the Death Master. Haven't really been paying too much attention to him, but he's here. Just mostly been bogged down in infantry. He's up to 100 kills on high health infantry, so just being the blender in this particular battle, rather than trying to find and snipe a Lithanar. He can. I mean, the Lithanar is slower, 46 speed compared to 54 for Deathmaster, so Deathmaster can catch him, especially with the Sigil, but I guess he's just been a little bit busy the whole time dealing with all of this cavalry and everything else. But a nice little pocket here formed by the High Elves. That miscast, unfortunately, does quite a bit of damage to the Plague Priest. Taking the last few arrows of a Lithanar there also routes him off, so that's not great. Snitch could potentially be cornered. He does have Pit Fighters of Hell's Deep, Clan Rats, some other units making their way over the side of the, I believe the Grinders, yeah, also still there, so some potential snare and damage from that. Reaver is going to get this Plague Priest out of here. Is obviously the right play. Definitely a great job in general, the Consul of Rome, using his light cavalry here, chasing routing units. Pit Fighters going to a rage. Unfortunately, they're going to enrage straight into some High Elf spears, which is not necessarily ideal for them, but I mean, these spears are very tattered. They're fighting some Clan Rats as well, so probably not going to go great for them, but the Pit Fighters are still taking some damage. Nice little end around rear charge from these Reavers. Will proc quite a bit leadership penalties for the Skaven here. Probably not going to rout quite yet, but might get some on these. Oh, but the Warp Grinder, both the Quake and the Snare used at the same time. Now, granted, this does use this up before the, like, kind of primary blob gets here with the Shadow Warriors and so on. Also, Lithanar now matched up one-on-one against Snitch with the assistance of some Shadow Warriors and Spearmen. Fortunately for Snitch, he'll do okay here. He might be able to get some damage on Lithanar, but especially being surrounded by the High Elf Infantry, generally the unit of the Lord with the surrounding infantry will win that fight. Having the support definitely makes a pretty big difference here. Rangers get in. Not quite able to finish off the Warp Grinders. Warp Grinders do deal magic damage against the Rangers' physical resistance, it should be noted. They have reasonably high weapon strength. Yeah, 96 weapon strength, actually. They don't have much attack, but when they do get hits in, it definitely hurts pretty bad. Grinders are a unit, I think, that's pretty essential for Skaven. Arguably OP in campaign, where they can just destroy walls straight up. It's kind of fun, honestly. But yeah, you see they're breaking here. A lot of units are breaking here. Snitch does actually survive. Lithanar pulls away from that engagement, I believe. Did he? Or yeah, he's here somewhere. Yep. Actually didn't even take much damage at all. But just moving over, helping to finish off these Rat Ogres. The Shadow Warriors proving their stats here. Their stats are proving useful, I should say. Everybody's exhausted, except somehow these Rat Ogres are still fresh. But yeah, interesting. We'll fast forward a little bit through this endgame as Snitch fights off the Blob. He's going to continue to rack up kills. Well over 200 kills now, I believe. Yeah, just passing over 200 there. And Consul of Rome doing the right thing, not blobbing all of his units in at the same time, kind of feeding them, not one at a time, but you do want them to be able to get a full surround, but, you know, just staying patient, letting his units kind of get damage. Deathmaster eventually says, you know what, let's go after a Lithanar here, try and make something happen, but a Lithanar with its Shadow Warriors going to be completely fine. What is that, a Flock of Doom too, just spiteful? I mean, not going to do a whole lot of damage to Snitch, but it's more about sending a message than anything, right? But yeah, Snitch is reasonably tanky, should take a while to kill. But there's just too many elves here for him. Especially cycle charging with Lithanar. Lithanar does have 30 charge bonus, 67 attack too, which is pretty legit. I mean, for a Archer Lord, 67, 57. I mean, that's a better stat line than a lot of like combat lords, to be honest. So, yeah, Lithanar definitely no pushover in this type of a situation. I mean, not exactly a fair fight, so who would be a pushover? But Yeah, this Amber Mage, cool to see the Eagle summons. I definitely think that's terrible that the High Elves have that. It's just objectively much worse than the Manticore summons, and like Consul here, having the Terror would have made a pretty big difference, I think, but at the end of the day, it didn't end up mattering. Yeah, Lithnar getting some great damage value in there. The Spearmen, I mean, they're here mostly just to hold the line, right? Rangers didn't do so much, but the Shadow Warriors actually did all pay for themselves for the most part. And yeah, we'll compare them to Deepwood Scouts here in just a minute. They're okay. I think they're definitely decent in this matchup especially, but Reavers, same thing. One of them doubling up on its value there in terms of damage. Again, chasing routing units, super critical in this matchup. Silverhelm's kind of got owned, but that's okay. Didn't need to necessarily win. Deathmaster carrying pretty hard. Lots of kill totals, but surprisingly low damage value. That kind of, against High Elves, it's weird. I guess just killed like all the Spearmen and Rangers. Decent kills on the Plague Priest, but again, not that much value. It was a pretty wide High Elf build, I have to say. This is definitely one of the wider High Elf builds I've seen. A lot of models to go through, so that would have been part of it. The Avalanche Mortars don't end up paying for themselves just barely. I mean, they still did get quite a bit of damage. This is a little bit of a rough day for the Skaven in terms of damage value. Actually, it doesn't seem like, I mean, based on how beat up Consul's army is, that this is necessarily all correct, but I guess it is. Anyway, yeah, Shadow Warriors. I have done a video in the past about Shadow Walkers. If you guys want to see that, go ahead and check that out. Definitely, yeah, a video worth watching, I think. But just to kind of look here, so the most comparable unit for Shadow Warriors, again, for me, is Deepwood Scouts. And it's not exactly the best comparison for Shadow Warriors because Deepwood Scouts are, I think, maybe tied with Chameleon Skinks in terms of best. I kind of flip back and forth on those two about which is better, but you can see immediately the Shadow Warriors just have better stats basically all around, not even including the martial prowess, right? But just straight up 18 better attack, which is very significant. They also have more HP, a little bit more armor, leadership, speed, weapon strength as well, +6 weapon strength, pretty significant. Slightly less ammunition, though, and they do basically have the same ranged attack, more or less, right? 4 AP, 18 non-AP on both. Now, as a result of that, the Deepwood Scouts, if you kind of measure, like, damage per, you know, kind of break it down like missile strength, like how much you pay for each shot, times damage, and so on, kind of break it down. Deepwood Scouts are a lot more cost effective. I mean, just because they're cheaper, obviously. And they also have 2 more ammunition, so theoretically they have slightly higher range damage output. Also come with Woodsman, which is nice, you know, operating in the forest terrain, and being what else? They also get buffs just straight up. You know, for melee defense, I believe, and some other stuff. I don't remember exactly, but Shadow Warriors, again, if you can keep them healthy throughout the course of a battle and then in the late game utilize their melee stats, like there we saw a pretty ideal situation against the Skaven, you can get that extra value from them, but just be aware they are a little bit expensive for what you're getting in terms of the ranged damage output. Yeah, Skaven, I would think, are kind of the ideal faction to go up against. Beastmen are another one that you could potentially make them work here. I don't like... For me personally, I don't like infantry skirmishers at all against the Beastmen, but if you are going to bring them, the 360 kind of mobile shooting ones are going to be a better option because they can try and move about. They can defend themselves a little bit better against like hounds and centaurs and so on. There's a lot of non-armored targets, which is another thing to consider. They don't have great AP values, although you can definitely take a very cheap caster with just Plague of Rust, right, and basically turn them into like demi-way watchers, which is something that Wood Elves cannot do. They do not have access to Lore of Metal, right? And caster with literally just Plague of Rust only is only 380 points, so it's really not too much of an upgrade if you kind of, you know, spread the cost out over, say, 4 Shadow Warriors. Suddenly having them trade like kind of demi Way Watchers is pretty good in some situations, but generally I would say they're going to be good against kind of the lower armor factions in situations where it's going to be harder to protect, and that extra mobility and stats will kind of come in handy. Obviously, Lothar and Seaguard are in a similar vein in that they're kind of archers that can protect themselves, but they're more so protecting against anti-large threats, and they're not as mobile, right? Can't shoot in that 360, which is why Skaven, being an infantry primarily faction, other than a few key units, then it makes more sense why you would not necessarily want the slower, kind of anti-large Lothar and Seaguard. But Lothar and Seaguard are going to be a lot more cost-effective in other matchups, I would say. Even against Beastmen, I don't know. That's an interesting one, because Lothar and Seaguard can kind of get crunked by Beastmen infantry. Maybe there's an argument to be made for Shadow Warriors there as well. Something like Dark Elves, potentially, if you want to try, again, if you want to try and go with that kind of mobile kite, or just have archers that are a little bit more escapable than your typical line. I guess I'm kind of rambling at this point, but hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.